The Underground. There we were in the vaulted tunnel running, you in your going-away coat speeding ahead, and me then like a fleet god gaining behind you before you turned to a reed, or some new white flower japped with crimson as the coat flapped wild and button after button sprang off and fell in a trail between the Underground and the Albert Hall. Honeymooning, mooning around, late for the proms. Our echoes die in that corridor, and now I come as Hansel came on the moonlit stones, retracing the path back, lifting the buttons to end up in a draughty lamplit station after the trains have gone. The wet track, bared and tense as I am, all attention for your step following, and damned if I look back. So this is set in actual time on their honeymoon, 1965 in London. And there's quite a lot of tension in the poem, and I think there's a lot going on under the surface here. There's running in the start, speeding ahead, and me chasing like a fleet god gaining before you turn to a reed. Now that's a classical allusion there. Pan, the half goat, half god, he chased Syrinx, who was turned into a reed before he could catch her. And there's other examples of that. Apollo chased Daphne. There's an allusion at the bottom as well when we talk here about I'm all attention for your step following, and damned if I look back. That's a reference to Eurydice and Orpheus, so we'll come to that in a moment. So the actual incident here is that they're on the honeymoon, they're going to the proms, a night of classical music in the Royal Albert Hall, and they're late. So they're dashing through this underground drafty tunnel, which is the Underground. Now, I chose one that is from round about the 1950s, 1960s. So this is the kind of tunnel that they're running through. These two visitors from Derry on their honeymoon in London for, I don't know if it's the first time or whenever, but here they are. He tells us that something happened, an incident happened, as the coat flapped wild and button after button sprang off and fell in a trail between the Underground and the Albert Hall. So this is now out of the tunnel. They're no longer in the tunnel, and it says here that her coat flapped open and all the buttons fell off in a trail, but they didn't have time to pick them up, so they just kept on going. He also says, and I should have said this here, before you turned into a reed, that's fair enough, or some new white flower japped with crimson. So there is the sense here that these two new lovers, these honeymooners, have changed in some way from the days before when they were getting married in Derry. He talks then about our echoes die in that corridor, and now I come. So this is, you need to decide here for yourself. Is this now Heaney, years later, writing the poem and trying to re-pick up the ideas and what he felt like at the time and trying to remember that honeymoon experience? Or is it him simply, after the prom, coming back and being a decent skin on the moonlit zones, retracing the path back and lifting the buttons and literally picking up the buttons? And you can get the idea of Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel, of course, were abandoned in the woods, but their kindly father, whichever version you read, gave them pebbles and stones which would help them find their way out of the forest, and they left a trail of them. So in this story, those pair are a pair that found their way to safety, and they found their way home, albeit through difficulty. So when you start to see that, you go, maybe this is a metaphor for marriage and some of the things that can go wrong in marriage, or some of the hard things in marriage. Where do they end up? Not in a glamorous place, not in the honeymoon suite. They end up in a drafty lamplit station after the trains have gone. I find it really quite a bleak image. I would imagine that that's what happened to the pair. they come out of the proms, although there's no mention of the music or the evening. They end up back here in the drafty lamplit station when all the trains have gone, so in between, in this echoey place. Is it a case that they're here and they're thinking, well, what do we do now? Who are we? We're no longer one, now we're two. Is that what's happening here? You have images here, bared and tensed as I am. So why is he bared and tensed? Why are they not walking back arm in arm? He's all attention for your step following, and damned if I look back. In this legend or the myth, Orpheus had to follow his lover Eurydice into the underworld, and the deal was he could have her back if he managed to walk miles and miles out of Hades and didn't look back once. And then, just as he saw the light of the overworld, he was afraid because he hadn't heard anything. He looks behind him to see is she still following, and Eurydice lets out a cry because she was right behind him, but then she's lost to the underworld. So he doesn't tell us if, when he looks back, he finds her or not. The poem is left without much satisfaction. There is the Eurydice, the girl, and Orpheus, and her going back into the underworld. There's an image of Hansel and Gretel. Okay, so I think it's probably difficult to look at this poem without talking about sex or without talking about honeymooning. There's a number of images that might put you onto this. So, for instance, the fact that they are honeymooning, mooning around, late for the proms. My question is, why are they late for the proms? What were they doing that made them late? Okay, so that's one possible thing. Here's the second thing. I've included this image of the crimson flower, Japdra crimson. And Japdra crimson means dashed or splashed with. There is a possibility that this is a reference to his wife losing her virginity on the night of their wedding, and the white sheet splashed with red blood. So that there is that possibility there. There's the mention here as well, and I've mentioned it but in a different way, and now I come. So is there something going on there? Because Heaney does not shy away from talking about the erotic, and in the poem The Skunk he definitely alludes to it. So whether or not that is the case, or whether it's perfectly, or it's something completely different, he is talking about marriage, and he is talking about marriage in a very different way. Not in a romantic way. Did they find their way home? Did they become lost along the way? Is it here bared and tense as I am? The new lovers finding their way through the relationship, trying to find their way through sexual experience. I don't know. And all I can go with are the words here, and you can make up your own mind, but the imagery is interesting. Some people find it troubling, and I'll leave that with you there.